Hi, everyone. Mike Malatesta here, and welcome back to the How Did Happen podcast. On this podcast, I dig in deep with every guest to explore the roots of their success, to discover not just how it happened, but why it matters. My mission is to find and share stories that inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. I want to live a life to the extent that it's possible of options rather than obligations. It's never like 100%. It's never totally black and white. And all these people you might see saying that it is, it's not. If you looked at their life, it doesn't run anything like that. Not at all. No. If you're in a situation where you can get selfish about your future, and certainly if you're an entrepreneur, you should be working towards that. Then this notion about being able to live your life better and better and better over time, guided by options rather than obligations, I think is very, very powerful. This episode is sponsored by The Dream Exit. The Dream Exit is a private, bespoke program for successful entrepreneurs with annual revenue between $5 million and $100 million who realize that they have one chance to get their dream exit right, and that the odds of realizing that dream by themselves, all alone, or at the last minute are stacked against them. In less than 90 days, we teach you how to design, build, and execute a customized dream exit playbook that gets your business ready for sale at its maximum value and gets you ready to maximize your meaning and purpose in your post-exit life, even if today you are not ready to sell. You see, dream exits just don't happen. They are the result of early, professional, and proven planning. So if you're an entrepreneur with annual sales between 5 and 100 million, and you want to learn how to 10x to 100x your chances of achieving the dream exit you deserve, go to dreamexitplaybook.com today.
All right. Hello, and welcome to the Ready Yet podcast, where I'm excited about today's guest because if you look at the tagline of this podcast, you'll never do what it takes until you become the person it takes to do it. And you were looking for a spokesmodel for that topic, right? If you're looking for an example of embodying both tactical achievement and just an amazing story and shift in who you were being to take all your achievements and blow it up from there. My guest today, Mike Malatesta, you can't really ask for a better example. So I can't wait for this conversation. Before we get in all of it, why don't you give everyone a little more formal introduction into who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, thanks for the compliment, I guess, to getting started. Yeah, it reminds me of that tagline you have there reminds me of this thing I believe in, that commitment comes before confidence, right? So until you totally commit to something, you have no chance of becoming good at it or confident at it, or even having the ability to achieve it. So I like your tag. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. Well, anyway, thanks so much for having me on, Erin. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a teacher. I'm a podcaster, and I'm an author. And I'd say I'm probably those things in that order. I started my first business when I was 26. So that was 30-ish years ago. And over those times, I've had plenty of successes. I've had many, many failures, but what I've always had is a consistent curiosity to learn and to be as good as I can be and to help as many people as I can help. And so what's interesting is it's like the success and the failures are kind of less important to me now than my own progress and the progress that I can help other people make in their lives, careers, or whatever, ambitions. So that's a very short version of who I am. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so just diving into everything that you share. So I was lucky enough to hear you speak at a Young Guns event a few months ago and meet you there. And ownership, love it. I have my autographed copy. I have questions as I went through it, and why don't we just dive right in and see where this takes us. In the beginning, one of the things you say in here, because this question has come up for me so many times, people have been asking me this lately, and I know my answer. One of the things you've said in here more than once is saying yes to every opportunity.
Yes.
How do you determine what's an opportunity and what's a distraction?
Hmm. So the origin of that in the book, saying yes to everything, was that's how I approached life for in the early
Right.
to mid part of my career, right? And that worked really well because I always felt like I was making myself more valuable in the eyes of other people when I would say yes to something that other people might say no to. So I thought it was a tremendous advantage. However, there came a time, and there probably comes a time in your life, and there probably comes a time in everyone's life where you feel like you're saying yes to too many things, and all of a sudden you're overcommitted, you're maybe frustrated, you don't want to do things that you signed up for, but you signed up for them, and you do them because it's an obligation, right? It's really
Right.
about things becoming obligations. And I found that for me, and I go into more detail on this in the book, but late part of 2003, I had something very significant happen in my life and my partnership at work. And it really brought to the forefront this whole life that I built around obligations that I created for myself that I was not excited about. That was actually that rather than them being accretive to my energy and to my effectiveness, they were detracting from it. And so for me, it was about getting selfish with my, and we can go into that later if you want, but ultimately, to answer your question directly, is how do I know what to say yes to and no to? I don't all the time know what to say yes and no to all the time. So I want to be very clear about that now. You hear a lot of people say, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And I say, those people are full of crap, because you don't ever know what is a hell yes for you, and you don't ever know what is a hell no for you. However, for me, I'm about, okay, I always try to live my life in the future. What do I want to make my property in the future? So those are the things that I'm most focused on. Now, that's pretty broad, meaning I have this idea or ideal of what I want my future to be, and I can be pretty clear about that. I don't know, though, what the path is and what the relationships are and what the opportunities are that are going to get me to that ideal or to that goal. So I kind of put things through a matrix, because do these things have the chance to help me get there? Then I'm going to be probably a yes on that. And if I say to myself, there's just no way, then I would say a no to it. And so that's how I've tried to just being clear about what I want has really helped me with my overcommitting to yeses.
Yeah, I think that some of the key things that you're saying that I really want to hit home on is, what you want.
Right.
Right. And I think so many people don't have the clarity. One of the things I say a lot is, I always ask people when I work with them, what are we building here? What are we trying to create? And they'll tell me a number. I want a $5 million business. I want a $1 million business. I want a $10 million business, whatever it is. But that's such an irrelevant piece of information, right? Because you can have a million different ways to have $1 million business, and they're going to be very different lives.
Yes.
And if you're not clear on what you want, to your point, you won't know what's a yes and what's a no.
Yes. Yeah. That example you just gave reminds me of that peeling the onion thing. Someone says they want something, and you say, well, why do you want that? And they respond to that with whatever. And you go, well, why is that important to you? And you just kind of keep digging down, because most people, and I think this is probably rings true with your experience, they think they want something because they've equated that something to something else that they've observed in their life. Maybe not their own experience, but someone else's, and they want to mirror that. They think that that's what they want. But you're right. When it comes right down to it, it's sometimes very difficult for people to say, this is exactly what I want. And you help them get there, it sounds like. So once you get there, you can start building a path. You can start, really helping them. If it's just this sort of like, this is what I think I want because this is what Erin has, and I would be happy if I was she. Yeah, then that's going to be tougher.
Well, and I think, it's a mixture of when you were raised, how you were raised, who you're currently around. Like, there's all these stories of what things are.
Yes.
As opposed to what they would be for us or what they actually are. I was just talking to somebody, ex-Secret Service. I have a new friend in my life. He's ex-Secret Service. He's very cool. And everything that you would apply to that, right? Great guy. And we were talking about how that's one of those jobs that you think is one thing and you just don't know what it is until you get there.
Yeah, I mean, just think of that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know this guy at all, or I don't know that life that well either. But just think to yourself, well, it looks pretty cool. You wear the nice suit, you got the dark shades, you got the thing in the air, you got
jogging
the gun
next
underneath.
to the limousine, the presidential.
Yeah, and you're always surrounded by like the most powerful people in the world, which seems really great. But then it's like, well, you're on call all the time. You never know where you're going to be the next day.
There's a lot of just standing around doing
right.
Nothing.
Yeah. It's very difficult to have a life that has meaning when you have that kind of a job, I'm assuming. Now, the meaning might come from the job, and that might be awesome. But yeah, you're right. You look at it and you go, oh, that would be cool.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Awesome. So one of the things you already said, and I 100% agree with you, you can't have confidence until you have commitment.
Yeah.
And one of the things I have this in my own life, I don't know an entrepreneur that doesn't go through this. And I want to preface this by saying we don't have time, even remotely, if we were to do 7 episodes of this show, to go through the stories that you share. And so if you're listening to this episode, I highly, highly recommend, do yourself a favor, grab a copy of Ownership, read it. It's an easy read. It's stories, but it's very, very impactful. Go figure out the background of what we're talking about here, because I don't know any entrepreneur that doesn't go through ups and downs. Yours are a little more up and down than average. Okay, we'll just leave it at that, right?
Okay,
I mean, that is a huge understatement, people. Like, huge understatement. Go get the book, dive into it. But even if you want to touch on any of that, I know you share it openly, so I'm not hiding anything here. I just, for time, for the sake of time, how do you, and you do talk about this a little bit in here, but I was just dying to know more, so I'm going to ask, how do you recommend, how can you even imagine creating, exuding confidence and moving forward while trying to hold the ups and downs and the downs and the downs and the downs and the challenges? Like, as an entrepreneur and a business owner, it doesn't do me, as a business consultant, it does me no good to show up and share the background shit show with the audience. Like, they don't want to know this. This does not instill confidence in my clients.
Right.
But it is my reality, and it's everybody's reality.
Yeah.
I don't like fake it till you make it. It feels like a lie. There's act as if. You can talk about compartmentalizing. Like, seriously, how do you freaking keep going?
Yeah. Well, there's something, everybody's got something unique about them that can keep them going in times where other people wouldn't. And whether it's my stories, whether it's the entrepreneurial journey, whether it's having some illness, whether it's having someone in your family with an illness, whether it's having had some unbelievable tragedy in your life, people find we're most of us are programmed to just keep moving forward. In my case, I would say there were 2 things. One, I had a little bit of that, and I don't know where that comes from, Erin. But 2, I had a responsibility to other people. It was not just, me. And that responsibility mattered to me, like showing up early to get ready for this podcast. It matters to me that I show up and deliver on what I'm supposed to deliver to people. And it's kind of like, I learned about this from a guy named Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach.
Mhm.
He talks about backstage and front stage. Front stage is, is in a theater environment, right? Front stage is what the audience sees. That's the production, that's the performance. And there's not one person in that audience who gives a crap about all the stuff that's, one, going on backstage during the performance, or two, had to go on to make the performance, unless it impacts their joy of the front stage performance, and they don't like it. Right? They don't like when that gets messed up. So I try to keep, even before I heard that, now it's like something I remind myself of because I have this model, from
Right.
his description. But even before that, it was like bringing whatever's going on with me to the surface, to everybody every day or every minute. How does that help them? It doesn't help them at all, and they don't care, and it's not their problem. So I think the combination of those two things, I have something built in me that helps me to be able to, keep moving forward. And the second is that I feel like I have a responsibility, and that's important to me to deliver on what I've promised people or what they expect from me.
No, I love it. It's, by the way, just to show, like, have you read this one yet, Dan Sullivan?
Yes, I have. Yep,
It's literally right here.
I like all the marks you got in there too.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, that was a good one. Right. It's a mixture of how much resilience. I think you're right. I think humans are highly, highly resilient. I think social media would have us believing woe is me is the case,
Right.
but I don't think that that's the case.
Yeah. Even, it's funny you say that, because even people who are like the immigrants that are, coming here, we spend a lot of time talking about how overburdened we are as a result and how our policy needs to change and all of those things. But we rarely talk about, I rarely hear people talking about what the hell is going on in someone's mind and life that would commit them to a 6,000, 5,000, 3,000 mile journey into the complete unknown, talk about entrepreneurial, risking all of their stuff because someone has told them, or they have seen pictures, or they have someone that there's something better for you over here, and they actually make it. That's just that regardless of what you feel, how you feel about the right, regardless of how you feel about the politics, it's like, that's a person I might want to have on my squad.
Right. Have a conversation with.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
I don't, one of the things I learned, so I grew up in Chicago in the 70s and 80s in public schools and we counted once, people from 22 different countries.
Okay.
Massive immigration waves. So nobody speaking English and nobody having any money. And you just learn that people are people, and which has been helped me immensely in all of my different careers. But the other thing that happened when I was younger, and you never know what somebody's going through, and you never know how they're needing to be resilient. And I was working in apartment complexes because at the age of 26, somebody decided, yeah, let's give Erin, full reign over our multi-million-dollar asset here.
Okay.
It used to be a thing, right? Now I look back and go, I was 26. What were you thinking? And we would have these people who were new to our country and didn't speak English in charge of, doing jobs. And you learn about them and you realize they're chemistry professors back home, but there's a language barrier. They're architects back home, but there's a language barrier. And to your point about humans being resilient, we just don't know.
Yeah.
And not everybody needs to know all of the details of all of our things in the moment. I think one of the things you do a fantastic job in your book and just in your conversations is you can learn from my scars. I don't have to show you the wounds.
Oh yeah. I like the way you say that.
Right. Like nobody wants to see your wounds, but to benefit them to learn from your scars is a gift.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that before.
Yes.
Going to use that.
Use that. Yes. So one of the things I'm curious about is, you get to this moment in your life where you really do have a big shift, right? Where you really, and you were having successes. Like, we're not talking about failure, failure, failure. What do I do? There was some huge successes there, but with challenges. Seriously, people, get the book, read the stories. You'll love it. One of the things that I know about me is I would love to tell you that I am inspired by puppies and rainbows and unicorns to do what I do. And that's just not the case. I make change when I'm sick of my own crap. Like, when I can't take me anymore, now is when we make the big shifts. And you talk about your 4 fallacies and being stuck in your valley. And I'd love to hear more about the catalyst, right? The catalyst that made you decide, I've got to change how I'm doing this.
Yeah. So that's funny. You change when you can't stand yourself. That's something I hadn't really thought about either, but it fits perfectly with the fallacies, right? So I had these fallacies about who I was and who I needed to be in order to be successful. And they were things like, I can outwork anybody else. So I don't need any help. That's a big one. I don't need any help. I thought people who needed help were losers. And I thought that for a long time, like people who hired consultants, or they got a coach, or they, even admitted that they had a problem. It's like, oh, that's
we
kind
must
of a
have grown up
weakness.
in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
But
those
and those fallacies really, so it's sort of like saying yes. For a while, I think they served me well, but then you have to realize that either when you can't stand yourself, or you realize that, you keep hitting the gas, and instead of the tires grabbing and pulling you out of wherever you are, they just dig in and they just start slipping, and you go nowhere, and you put more on it. Like, this used to work every time I did it, and it doesn't work anymore. Comes a point where you have to admit the truth. And for me, the fallacies that I was living under, which were mostly like, basically, I'm better than everybody else, kind of like fallacies that were running my life, were hurting me. They got me, so like a Pareto principle, right? They got me to a point where past where I thought most people could get, and they started to fail me, or I started to rely on them. That's probably better. I started to rely on them after the expiration date had passed. So that's a fallacy. That's the fallacy. And my realization about those fallacies happened when I was in this valley of uncertainty, as I call it, which is, in strategic coach language, in maybe in 10 times is easier than two times, they talk about gap in the gain. There's a whole book about the gap. Well, we all get into this thing that you call it a gap, call it a funk, call it whatever. It's where you're basically wishing your life was something else, but you're ignoring all of the things that got you to where you are. And so after my partner Butch died in a tragic fire, I dropped into this thing I identify as the valley of uncertainty, which was really a place where I was still representing myself, I think, appropriately to the people that I felt I had a responsibility to. But on the inside, I was really challenged by the thought that I'm not sure what to do.
And I think not knowing what to do is one of the worst mindset places to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, once you make the decision, even if you haven't had the difficult conversation, you're still better. You feel better than what you're describing. You're right, that valley of uncertainty. To me, nothing is more horrific internally than when I can't figure out or decide what to do.
Yes. Yeah. And And so, yeah, that was going on. And then it was accompanied by this sort of wish, this hope that someone would come along
Right.
and
Just fix it.
yeah, and lift me up out of this valley and
Right.
dust me off and say,
Now
here's the
you're fine.
road to the promised land. Just walk
Right.
down there and that's where it is.
If
But
only.
my time in there was painful, but it was ultimately proved to be very helpful to me because one, it allowed me to finally recognize these fallacies that I was living under. And two, it led to this whole path towards what I call getting selfish, which led to me actually exploring my future and understanding that I could make my future something that I own. And if without a future that I own, it occurred to me, how could I possibly move toward it in a thoughtful, consistent way? And even more than that, how could I convey to my team and to the people who were working with me and helping me how they could best serve this mission to get to where this future that we want to make our property we want to own.
And the way you describe it, it's the way that I believe it. When I first learned about a concept, radical personal responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
I call it be in charge. That's where the tagline for my business came from. If I learned very early that if you don't make decisions for you, people who are not vested in you get to make those decisions, right? And when you first start thinking about personal responsibility, especially with the stories that you share, it's like, it sucks because then you can't blame all the other people, right?
Right.
It doesn't start
Yeah.
out as something that feels so good, but then you realize it's the most powerful thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah. Here's a litmus test that I find. You come up against you come up talking to or whatever, interacting with an entrepreneur or a business owner or a leader of any kind, and they begin to blame something that's not going right in their life or their business on somebody else. You have a problem child there. You have someone who is living under fallacies like I was living under and who would very much like to honestly put their hand up and say, I'm not equipped to take responsibility for this. How can you help me get back on track? Because without that, you're not going to make any progress. And then getting back to the if you don't know where you're going to go, people try to take you where they want to go. That's true. But there may be more to that. And it may be like they, if they don't know what you want, they observe your behavior. And when they observe your behavior, they make assumptions about what it is you actually do want, which is in line with what you're behaving. So they try to do that. They try to like give you what they are interpreting you want, even though it's not what you want. In fact, you're so frustrated by it, and they just layer it on more because they think that's what you want. So it's so important to, and you don't have to call it getting selfish. You can call it focusing. You could call it whatever you want, but it's so important if you want to lead people and you want to accomplish big goals to actually know what that looks like so that you can share that, convey that with other people in a way that they understand, and then they can take autonomy. They can bring their talent, autonomy, whatever, to that mission, as opposed to just waiting there and saying, well, I know he or she'll tell me what they want at some point. And I'll just continue to do what I think they want until then.
Well, and it really does all come together, right? Because you need to make the commitment to build the confidence. You need to know where you're going in order to make decisions. And going back to, now that I listen to you, going back to the first question I asked you is, how do you know what to say yes to and what's a distraction? If you don't have all these things, or, no one's perfect, they're going to be hits and misses. But if you haven't worked on these things and figured them out, you become susceptible to more bad decisions.
Yes. Yeah. And so I have 3 words that I try to apply to that. So that leads to obligations instead of options. And I want to reverse that. I want to live a life to the extent that it's possible of options rather than obligations. And so having that, and you're right, it's never like 100%. You can do, there's never totally black and white. And all these people who you might see saying that it is, it's not. If you looked at their life, it doesn't run anything like that, not at all.
No.
But if you're in a situation where you can get selfish about your future, and certainly if you're an entrepreneur, you should be working towards that, then this notion about being able to live your life better and better and better over time, guided by options rather than obligations, I think is very, very powerful.
Love it. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I really want to talk about what you're doing now. So I know that you went through what you went through, and you ended up in a situation where you sold 2 different businesses, I think, for over 100 million each that you had started.
That's right. Not 100 million each, but over 100 million together.
Yeah. Okay. Still impressive.
Thank you.
Right. How did you go from job to entrepreneur, small business owner to business owner, right? And to now you're really, I'm going to assume it's your 3rd iteration. If you're like me, it's like your 100th iteration. But where what you're doing now with helping folks create their dream exit. One of the things that I talk a lot about, just to give you some perspective here on why I'm so into this, is I think most people who start businesses get stuck at entrepreneur, solopreneur, because they're not able to get over the bridge into business owner.
Yeah.
Right? They're the business. They're under the fallacies. They've built the business around them. They are the business. They are the bottleneck. Like, hello, hi, it's me. I'm the problem. Right? And then they don't get over the bridge to business owner. And because they can't figure that out, they retreat. Right? They retreat and end up with the business they settle for instead of the one that they can have. And so this is why I'm excited about this from your perspective. Those are the people that I'm working with. Those are my audience. So now you have something that you call the dream exit, which I love, because if you don't have an exit plan, you don't have a business. Like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's my corporate background, right? Like, bring business tactics and tools and approach to business, not solopreneurship, which is great, by the way, if you've chosen to be a solopreneur as opposed to gotten stuck there. So how did you, your story and your journey to there? I'd love to hear about how you ended up deciding to do this, and more about what it is.
The dream exit you're talking about? Or okay. Yeah. So the notion for the dream exit came from me exploring my talent and experience and trying to think about how I could help entrepreneurs in a way that was different than what I was seeing other people help entrepreneurs with. So there's a lot of people who help teach and coach entrepreneurs how to improve the strategy in their business, the tactical execution in their business, the culture in their business, all of these different things, which are all very valuable. And truth be told, I could probably do that. But then I was thinking about all the people, 24, 25 people plus their partners, that I've been involved in the purchase of their business. And I started thinking about the 2 times that I've been involved in selling the business. And I started thinking about all the entrepreneurs that I know who have either tried to sell their business unsuccessfully, or they've sold it and have some sort of regret about it. And I thought, okay, here's where I'm going to be most valuable to people. One, I know what it's like to do both sides of the transaction. So I bring that, and I don't think there are many people who have that who have also been the entrepreneur, right? It's like there's a lot of corporate people who sell companies, but it's different. There's a lot of private equity and other investors who bought and sold companies, but it's different. And it pains me to see entrepreneurs work so hard to establish a successful business and not realize what I call and define as the dream exit. It pains me. So there are two things in a dream exit, Erin. One is you get maximum value for your business. Now, that doesn't always mean you get the highest price, because you may not want the highest price. You may want to sell to a particular sort of, competitor or partner, whatever. But regardless, you need to be set up to realize that maximum value. And number two, and more importantly, a lot of your value, you think, if you're like most entrepreneurs, is tied up in you as your business. People ask, what do you do? Well, I own so-and-so. That's who I am. And to an extent that is, but without something else to look forward to after you sell your business, that often becomes a really, really big problem. And I mean a big problem. It can become a financial problem. It can become a dependency problem. It can become a divorce problem. It can become all kinds of problems. And people, so I want people to understand that if you want to get maximum value and meaning from your business and for you personally, you need to start working on that. You need to understand what is involved in getting that and put a plan together. I call it a playbook, which is the first part of what I help people with, to start exploring all the things you need to be exploring and getting some different definition, ultimately knowing what you want, right? Know what you want. So that's super important. That whole process I call, buyer's lens, putting yourself in a buyer's shoes. So many entrepreneurs don't put themselves in a buyer's shoes ever until they decide to accept an offer. And then they're going to try to figure out how to do that against someone who's done this, many, many times. And the likelihood that you're going to level that playing field by yourself all alone it's low, very low. And then I don't want entrepreneurs to go through that whole process of building their business, sell it, and for a moment have regret or want to do over or be pissed off or just essentially, lose the value of everything that they've created, because in their mind, they've messed this last part of it up. And 4 out of 5 business owners wish they could have spent more time working on these two things after they've sold their business. Now, they don't even have to admit that, right? They've sold the business. Why would you? But right. 4 out of 5 admit that that's the case. And I think that's horrible. I think that's a terrible way to end what should be an amazing way to end. And so that's what the Dream Exit is all about. I help people. I teach people how to put that playbook together. I teach them and guide them through the value creation process for themselves and for their business. And then when they do want to sell, and if they do want to sell, I offer to help them as their sort of the only person liaison in the process who's 100% focused on them getting what they want. And I feel like there's tremendous value in that for everybody.
Awesome. And truthfully, what I also really like about it is the way to create an amazing business, and the way to create an amazing business that's sellable is actually, it's not a dissimilar process. You go
right.
through this, you're still going to end up with something of much higher value than you had before.
Correct.
Usually just put it on your tax code a little different, right? You report the money on your taxes a little different depending on what you're trying to do. But that's really the only difference.
Yeah. And for all the people that you mentioned, that they start and then they get stuck for some reason. The reason that most people get stuck, in my experience, and then stop trying is because they don't know what they want. 2, they aren't able to convey what they want to the people around them. 3, they end up getting their nose into, and I know from experience, so they end up getting their nose into every single part of the business. Not the parts they liked that they actually started the business for, but all of them, because they feel like that's what I have to do. I have to manage everything. And once they get into that mindset and that habit, it's very difficult for them to get out of it because they think this is the only way. And all you have to do is look around at all the people who have been able to get past that. And it's impossible for you to say, this is the only way.
Absolutely.
This is a choice. You choose to do that. And if that's your choice, fine, but be happy with it. Because if that's your choice and you're not happy with it, there's only one
Those are
person
the people who need to talk to.
Yeah, that's that whole
Mike.
responsibility for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on time, and I want to thank you so much for your stories, your time, your energy, your effort, all your insights. Seriously, grab a copy of Ownership. Really love this. Check out the Dream Exit. I think we have, I know we'll put the link in the show notes, but it's
super easy. Dreamexit.com.
Oh, see, look at you. Marketing 101. Make it easy. Marketing 101. Make it easy. Dreamexit.com. So thank you again for joining me. I love chatting with you and hearing more of your story. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for buying the book, reading the book, promoting the book, and having me on your wonderful show. I'm very impressed by what you're doing, and it's been an honor to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the show. And before you go, I just have 3 requests for you. 1, if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer. If you're really into it, leave me a review, write something nice about me, give me 5 stars or whatever you feel is most appropriate. Number 2, I've got a book. It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. It's an Amazon bestseller, and I'd love for you to read it or listen to it on Audible or wherever else, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it everywhere. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download it today so that you can have your very own copy. And if you get it, please let me know what you think. Number 3, my newsletter. I do a newsletter every Thursday, and I talk about things that are interesting to me or I give more information about the podcast and the podcast guests that I've had and the experiences that I've had with them. You can sign up for the podcast today at my website, which is my name, MikeMalatesta.com. You do that right now, put in your email address, and you'll get the very next issue. The newsletter is short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.